The street was dark, silent except for the distant hum of a highway far away, and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. It was lined with tall, ancient trees whose branches clawed at the night sky, their silhouettes twisting and swaying, casting eerie patterns on the pavement below. Streetlights cast pale yellow circles, leaving deep shadows in between, pockets of darkness where anything could be hiding, unseen. Not many cars passed. It was a place where people felt safe, where neighbors waved from driveways and children played until dusk. The houses were large, set far apart. Shouts in one would never reach the next. Each home stood in its own quiet world, separated by wide lawns and tall hedges. Tonight, a cool autumn breeze rustled the leaves, and a sliver of moon offered little light, barely illuminating the tops of the trees and the rooftops below. In one of the largest houses, lights glowed warmly, promising comfort and safety within, a beacon in the darkness. Laughter faded as the family prepared to go out, a new babysitter on her way. The children's voices echoed down the hall, excitement and nerves mingling in the air. The house was old, but well kept, a large oak tree scraping its branches against the upstairs windows as if trying to get inside. Inside, comfort and family photos filled the rooms. A grand staircase led to the children's bedrooms, where toys and books were scattered across the floor. It was a typical home, a place of security. But houses have secrets, and sometimes, the quietest homes hold the loudest mysteries. The air grew colder as the minutes ticked by, the ticking clock echoing through the halls, marking the slow passage of time. The wind picked up, making the tree branches scratch more insistently at the glass, a sound that seemed to grow louder in the stillness. The family car waited in the driveway, porch light shining in the darkness, a silent witness to the night's unfolding events. It was a perfect picture of suburban peace, the kind of place where nothing bad ever seemed to happen, but sometimes even the most peaceful nights can hold a sense of suspense, a peace about to be shattered. Jill, 16, turned onto the street, clutching her bag as she approached the imposing house. She rang the doorbell, greeted by Mrs. Miller's warm smile. Inside, the house was cozy. Mr. Miller put on his coat while two energetic children, Lucy and Tom, played nearby. Mrs. Miller showed Jill the kitchen, the living room, and the phone with their number beside it. The bedtime routine was simple. The children should be in bed by 8, just a story and sleep. Jill felt comfortable. The Millers were kind, the house inviting. The parents hugged their children, reminded Jill to lock the doors, and promised to return by midnight. Jill waved as they left, the car's engine fading into the night. She locked the door, the click echoing in the quiet hallway. Now, she was alone with the children. The night was just beginning. Jill played with Tom and Lucy, reading them a story about a friendly dragon. By 8, the children were yawning. She led them upstairs, tucked them in, and left their doors ajar with nightlights glowing. Downstairs, the house was silent except for the steady tick of the grandfather clock. Jill turned on the television, volume low, and snacked on crisps. The house felt enormous, the silence pressing in. An hour passed. The film blurred as her mind wandered. Every creak made her jump. Was it the wind, or something else? She checked the back door, secure, and peered into the blackness outside. Her own reflection startled her in the window. Back in the living room, the clock's ticking grew louder, each tick a countdown. The silence was heavy, unsettling. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. By 10 o'clock, the house was still. Jill crept upstairs to check on the children. Both slept peacefully. She returned to the living room, turning off the TV as silence rushed back in. The only sounds, the clock, her own breathing, and the occasional creak. Shadows stretched in the corners. A floorboard creaked upstairs. Jill froze, heart pounding. Was it the children, or something else? She tried to reason. Old houses make noises, it's just the wind. But fear crept in, cold and persistent. The Millers wouldn't be back for hours. Time dragged. She hugged herself, listening to every sound. The rustle of leaves, a distant car, the scratching of the tree branch. The scratching sounded almost like fingernails now. She told herself she was being foolish, but a small voice whispered that something was wrong. The silence shattered as the phone rang, shrill and jarring. Jill's heart raced. Maybe it was the Millers checking in. She answered, "Hello, Miller residence," her voice shaky, only silence on the other end, just faint crackling. "Hello," she tried again, but no response. She hung up, unsettled. Back on the sofa, she couldn't relax, glancing at the phone, expecting it to ring again. The house felt colder, the shadows deeper. The ticking clock sounded like a warning. She tried to convince herself it was a wrong number, just a coincidence. But the unease grew. She felt watched, not alone. She wrapped herself in a blanket, but the fear was a cold she couldn't shake. 15 minutes of tense silence passed before the phone rang again, even more jarring. Jill hesitated, but forced herself to answer. "Hello," she whispered. This time, a man's low, raspy voice. "Have you checked the children?" Ice shot through her veins. It wasn't Mr. Miller. "Who is this?" she demanded, voice trembling. The man only chuckled, a horrible, guttural sound. "Why haven't you checked the children?" he rasped again. Panic seized her. How did he know about the children? Was it a prank? The voice sounded unhinged. "Leave me alone!" she shouted, slamming the receiver down. Shaking, she backed away from the phone, the man's words echoing in her mind. Should she go upstairs? Was he warning her or luring her? She stood frozen, caught between fear of upstairs and fear of staying put. The clock's ticking mocked her. Jill huddled on the sofa, blanket pulled tight, mind racing. Should she call the police? Would they believe her? She decided to wait. If he called again, she'd call for help. The house was silent, but the silence felt menacing. She imagined the man watching her, hiding somewhere close. She ran to the window, yanking the curtains shut, but knew it was a false comfort. The phone rang a third time. Jill froze, the ringing drilling into her mind. She finally snatched up the receiver. The man's voice. "I see you! Why are you so scared?" Jill screamed, dropping the phone. The receiver dangled, the man's laughter echoing from the earpiece. He could see her. He was in the house. Panic overwhelmed her. She had to get out, had to get the children out. Jill's mind cleared. She needed help. The fear that had gripped her moments before was now replaced by a desperate determination. Every shadow in the room seemed to move. Every creak in the house made her heart race faster. She grabbed the receiver, dialed the operator, voice shaking. Her hands trembled so badly she nearly dropped the phone, but she forced herself to focus, pressing each number with deliberate care. "There's a man. He keeps calling. He's threatening me." Jill's voice cracked, the words tumbling out in a rush. She could barely keep her composure, but she knew she had to make the operator understand the urgency. The operator was calm, her voice a lifeline in the chaos. "Give me your address, I'll call the police." The steadiness in her tone gave Jill a sliver of hope. Jill stammered out the details, begging for help. She repeated her address twice, her words tumbling over each other, desperate to be understood. "He said he can see me. I think he's in the house." Her voice dropped to a whisper, as if afraid the caller could hear her even now. The operator's tone sharpened. "We can trace the call, but keep him on the line for at least a minute if he calls back." There was a new urgency in her voice, a warning Jill couldn't ignore. Jill nodded, terrified but determined. She wiped away tears, steeling herself for what might come next. The operator reassured her. "The police are on their way. Remember, keep him talking." Jill clung to those words, repeating them in her mind like a mantra. Jill hung up, heart pounding, waiting for the phone to ring. The silence in the house was deafening, broken only by the ticking of the clock and her own ragged breathing. When it did, she answered, voice trembling. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she forced herself to stay calm, remembering the operator's instructions. The man rasped. "Thinking of calling the police? That's not a good idea." His voice was colder, more menacing than ever before, sending chills down her spine. Jill forced herself to ask, "Who are you? What do you want?" She tried to keep him talking, her mind racing with fear and questions. He laughed, "I want to see your fear." The words echoed in her mind, making her skin crawl. Suddenly the operator broke in, frantic. "Get out of the house! The calls are coming from upstairs!" Jill's blood ran cold as the truth hit her. She was not alone. Jill froze, the operator's words echoing in her mind. "The calls are coming from upstairs." Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear anything else. Her breath caught in her throat as the realization set in. Realization hit like a wave. There was another phone upstairs, in the parents' bedroom. The truth was, suddenly, horribly clear. He wasn't outside. He was in the house the whole time. Every shadow, every unexplained sound, now took on a sinister meaning. The creaks, the feeling of being watched. It was all real. The sense of dread that had been building all night was justified. He was upstairs near the children. The thought sent a chill down her spine, her mind racing with fear for their safety. The thought of Tom and Lucy broke her paralysis. She knew she had to act, no matter how terrified she was. She turned toward the grand staircase, desperate to reach the children, but before she could move, the front door burst open with a crash. 2 police officers rushed in, guns drawn, their faces tense and determined as they scanned the darkened hallway. Jill, pale and trembling, pointed up the stairs. "He's up there," she whispered, her voice barely audible. One officer stayed with her, trying to calm her shaking form. The other charged upstairs, shouting, "Police, show yourself!" The house echoed with his command. What they found became local legend, whispered about for years in the quiet town. The man was in the children's room, lurking in the shadows, his intentions unspeakable. He had murdered them before making the first call, using the parents' phone to torment Jill, playing a cruel game from just upstairs. The night left scars on everyone. Jill would never forget the terror, nor the guilt of not reaching the children in time. The Millers returned to tragedy, their home forever changed by the horror that had unfolded within its walls. The quiet street was never the same. Neighbors locked their doors tighter, and whispers of that night lingered for years. And Jill, haunted forever by the chilling words, "The calls are coming from inside the house." The echo of that night would follow her always, fade out. The house was quiet when I arrived. It was a big house on a dark street, shadows stretching across the lawn. Mr. and Mrs. Miller were getting ready to leave for a dinner party. Mrs. Miller showed me the essentials, the phone in the hallway, the children's bedrooms upstairs. The kids were already asleep. "Good sleepers," she said. I reassured her. I'd babysat plenty of times. The front door clicked shut behind them, echoing in the silence. I wandered through the downstairs rooms, noting the large TV and the inviting sofa. I made myself a cup of tea, settling in for what I thought would be a normal night. The house felt huge and empty, every creak amplified. I sat on the sofa, flipping through a magazine, the only sounds the rustle of paper and the ticking of a grandfather clock. I thought about the children upstairs, safe in their beds. My job was simple: keep things quiet and calm until the parents returned. The hours passed slowly, the clock marking each moment of stillness. I finished my tea, considering turning on the TV, but the silence was oddly comforting. Outside, the wind rattled the branches against the windows, a soft, persistent whisper. I pulled a blanket over my legs, feeling warm and safe from the cold night. The house was a haven, and I let myself relax. I felt a little sleepy, closing my eyes for a moment, just listening to the quiet. The peace was complete, the kind that makes you forget the world outside. I let my guard down, just for a moment. The night seemed ordinary, almost boring. I had no idea what was coming. The quiet was about to break, and everything would change. Suddenly, a loud noise shattered the peace. The telephone. The shrill ringing made me jump, my heart pounding. Who would call so late? Maybe Mrs. Miller had forgotten something. I put down the magazine and walked to the hallway, the phone's insistent ringing filling the house. I took a deep breath and picked up the receiver. "Hello?" My voice sounded small in the empty hall. Silence. I tried again, louder. "Hello? Is anyone there?" Still nothing, just a faint, almost imperceptible sound. I listened harder. Breathing. Slow. Soft. Deliberate. Not a wrong number. Not a prank call. "Who is this?" My voice trembled. The breathing continued, steady and calm. A cold chill crept up my spine. Why would someone call and just breathe? I waited, hoping for a word, a laugh, anything. Nothing. Just the breathing. Then, a soft click. The line went dead. I stood there holding the silent receiver, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. The house was silent again, but the peace was gone. The quiet now felt heavy, watchful. I tried to convince myself it was just a prank, but the unease lingered, thick in the air. I put the phone down, hands shaking. The night had changed. I was no longer alone with my thoughts. Someone else was out there. I tried to shake off the strange feeling from the call. Maybe it was a joke, I told myself. My friends knew I was babysitting. I tried to laugh, but it sounded hollow. The house felt bigger, more isolated. The grandfather clock's ticking now sounded ominous. I picked up the magazine, but couldn't focus. My eyes darted to the windows, curtains drawn, but the darkness pressed in. It felt like someone could be watching from outside. I checked the front door, locked. The back door, secure. Each lock I checked made me feel a little better, a little more in control. I was safe inside. The caller was just a voice, far away. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. I turned on the TV, letting the noise fill the room. The old film was a welcome distraction, pushing away the silence. I pulled the blanket up, trying to lose myself in the story. For a few minutes, it worked. I almost forgot about the call, the breathing. The house was just a house again. I was just a babysitter. But the unease lingered, just beneath the surface. Every sound seemed amplified, every shadow seemed to move. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't shake the feeling. Something was wrong. I just didn't know what. Not yet. Then the phone rang again, slicing through the TV's noise. My body went rigid, heart racing. I stared at the screen, but all I heard was the ringing. I didn't want to answer, but what if it was Mrs. Miller? I had to. I forced myself up, legs heavy, and walked to the hallway. The ringing grew louder with every step. I stared at the phone, dreading what I'd hear. I snatched up the receiver, not saying a word. Silence. Then, the breathing. Soft, slow, steady. Fear washed over me. This wasn't a prank. My hand shook. I wanted to hang up, to run. "Who is this?" I whispered. No answer, just the sound of someone's breath, close and intimate. It felt like they were right next to me. I spun around, searching the shadows. Nothing. I was alone. Another click. The line went dead. I stood there, frozen, the silence pressing in. The fear was real now, undeniable. Someone was playing a game, and I was the target. I put the phone down, heart pounding. The house felt smaller, the walls closing in. I was trapped in someone else's story, and it was only getting started. I stood in the hallway, the dead receiver pressed to my ear. My mind raced for explanations. A cruel joke, a neighborhood kid. It had to be a prank. That was the only thing that made sense. I forced myself to hang up, hands trembling. I tried to calm my breathing, telling myself not to panic. The doors were locked, the windows secure. I was safe, but the breathing had sounded so close, so personal. It wasn't laughter or background noise, just one person, focused on me. The calls were too deliberate, the silence too perfect. It felt like a threat. Why would someone do this? What did they want? The house felt less like a fortress, more like a cage. I tried to push the fear down, blaming my imagination. This was real life, not a scary story. I wouldn't let them know they'd scared me. If the phone rang again, I wouldn't answer. I tried to believe it. Ignoring the fear didn't work for long. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming. I checked every door and window downstairs, locking curtains and blinds. Each click of a lock felt like a small victory. I was building a wall between myself and the night. Even the tiny bathroom window was locked. I stood in the living room, the TV's noise now just background, but I didn't feel safer, just more trapped. By closing off the outside, I'd blinded myself. I couldn't see if someone was out there. I'd locked myself in with my fear. The silence between calls was worse than the calls themselves. I was just waiting for the phone to ring again, waiting for something to happen. The house felt like a fortress under siege. But the enemy was invisible, and I was alone. The phone rang again, more menacing than before. It felt like the caller knew I was scared, like it was a game. I told myself I wouldn't answer, but I couldn't resist. Maybe this time it would be different. I walked to the phone, every step heavy. My hand hovered over the receiver, my mind screaming to leave it, but I picked it up, bracing for the worst. Silence. Then, the breathing, closer this time. It sounded less distant, more immediate, as if the caller was just outside the door, or inside the house. The thought hit me. An extension phone. Mrs. Miller hadn't mentioned one, but what if there was? The fear was no longer creeping, it was overwhelming. If there was an extension, the caller could be inside. The breathing was calm, patient, as my panic rose. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I was frozen, listening to the steady breath. Then, the click. The line went dead. I was left with a horrifying thought. The caller might be in the house. The silence was suffocating. I stared at the phone, unable to move. The game had changed. I was no longer sure where the danger was coming from. The house felt smaller, the shadows deeper. I was trapped with my fear, and the night was far from over. I needed to know the truth. I needed to act, before it was too late. I slammed the phone down, panic rising. Was there another phone upstairs? Was the caller inside? The house felt claustrophobic, every shadow alive. I backed away, eyes on the dark staircase. The children's rooms were up there, and maybe an extension phone. The breathing had sounded so close, so real. I had to know if someone was up there. But the thought of climbing those stairs was terrifying. What if I found nothing? Worse, what if I found someone? I couldn't just wait downstairs. The children were my responsibility. That thought gave me courage. I turned toward the staircase, legs weak but determined. Each step creaked in the silence. I was going upstairs. I had to protect the children. I had to face whatever was waiting. I couldn't run anymore. Each step up the stairs was a battle. The landing above seemed impossibly far. My heart pounded as I reached the top. 3 doors, 2 children's rooms, 1 master bedroom. I listened, nothing but the faint TV and my own heartbeat. The silence was heavy, watchful. I crept to the master bedroom, the door ajar. Inside, darkness and the shape of a bed. On the bedside table, a second phone. My blood ran cold. There was an extension. The caller could have been inside all along. As I stared at the phone, a new sound reached me. Not the phone, not the house settling. A soft noise from one of the children's rooms. A quiet shuffling. The horror of the calls was replaced by a new terror. The children were supposed to be asleep. My job was to protect them. The story wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The old house stood silent, its windows like watchful eyes peering into the darkness. Against the inky black sky, the house seemed to shrink into itself, as if hiding from the world. Shadows danced in the moonlight, stretching across the unfamiliar rooms, twisting and shifting with every passing cloud. I, Janie, was the babysitter for Leo and Mia, both sleeping upstairs, their soft breathing the only sign of life in the vast house. The Hendersons were out late, leaving me alone in their sprawling, creaking home, every floorboard and pipe seeming to groan in protest at the quiet. I tried to read on the sofa, a single lamp casting a small island of light in the sea of darkness, but the words blurred together as my mind wandered. The grandfather clock ticked steadily, but tonight it sounded like a countdown, each tick echoing through the empty halls. I couldn't focus. Every sound made me jump. The creak of the stairs, the sigh of the wind, even the settling of the house felt amplified. Rain began to patter against the windows, isolating me further, the steady rhythm masking other, subtler noises. The house was at the end of a long lane, surrounded by woods. No neighbors, no help nearby. The trees pressed close, their branches scratching at the glass. I wrapped a blanket around myself, trying to ignore the unease that crept up my spine, wishing for the comfort of familiar voices. Just nerves, I told myself, forcing a shaky laugh into the empty room. I decided to make hot chocolate, hoping it would calm me. The ritual of warming milk and stirring cocoa, a small comfort in the gloom. The kitchen was sleek, but full of lurking shadows, every corner seeming deeper and darker than before. As I stirred the cocoa, my eyes landed on the old rotary phone on the wall, its presence oddly unsettling. It looked ancient, out of place, as if it belonged to another era, entirely. I wondered when it had last rung, and who might have answered it in years past. The house felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to break the silence. I tried to shake off the feeling, but the silence pressed in, thick and heavy, making the air feel colder. I was alone. Or so I thought, the weight of the empty house settling around me like a shroud. The children slept peacefully upstairs, unaware of the tension that filled the rooms below. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, telling myself that everything was fine, that I was just being silly. The night stretched ahead, heavy with anticipation, every minute feeling longer than the last. Little did I know, everything was about to change, and the quiet night would soon be shattered. Just as I lifted my mug, the silence shattered. The rotary phone rang, loud, jarring, relentless. I jumped, spilling hot chocolate on my hand. Who could be calling at midnight? The Hendersons had my mobile. My heart pounded as the phone kept ringing. Maybe a wrong number, I hoped. I forced myself to answer, voice trembling. Hello? Only silence. Heavy, crackling, unnatural. I repeated, hello? Is anyone there? Then breathing, slow, raspy, chilling. Someone was there, just listening. I demanded, who is this? But only got more breathing. Panic surged. I slammed the receiver down. My heart raced, hands shaking, the hot chocolate and book forgotten. All I could think about was that silent, terrifying caller. The house felt even bigger, darker. I stared at the phone, waiting. The rain outside seemed to grow louder. I was no longer just uneasy, I was afraid. Something was very wrong, and I was completely alone. I tried to convince myself it was a prank, but dread clung to me. I sat on the sofa, every creak making me jump. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. I didn't want to answer, but what if it was important? I forced myself to pick up. Hello? Silence. Then, the same breathing. I was about to hang up when a voice finally spoke. Low, gravelly, emotionless. Have you checked the children? My blood ran cold. Why would he ask that? Was he watching? Terror gripped me. Who is this? What do you want? No reply. Just a click. The call ended. I stood there shaking, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. The question echoed in my mind. The fear was real now. I had to check the children. Panic took over, a cold wave crashing through my body and leaving me breathless. My mind raced, every shadow in the room suddenly alive with menace. I raced upstairs, the man's words echoing in my head, each syllable twisting tighter around my nerves. My heart hammered so loudly, I thought it might give me away. The stairs groaned under my frantic steps, the sound magnified in the silence, as if the house itself was warning me to turn back. I burst into the children's room, heart pounding so hard, it hurt. Desperate to see their faces and know they were safe. Leo was asleep, teddy bear in his arms, his small chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm that seemed impossibly calm. Mia slept peacefully in her cot, her tiny hands curled into fists, completely unaware of the terror swirling just outside her dreams. Relief washed over me. They were safe. For a moment, I let myself believe everything was fine, but the fear returned, sharper than before. The caller knew about them. Was he watching us right now? Was he already inside the house, hiding in the darkness? I peered out the window. Nothing but rain and darkness stared back. Still, I felt watched, as if unseen eyes followed my every move. The house felt like a trap, every familiar corner now sinister, every creak a threat. I was locked inside with 2 innocent children, their safety resting entirely on my trembling shoulders. The silence was now menacing, thick and heavy, pressing in from all sides. I couldn't dismiss it as a prank anymore. This was real. This was dangerous. The threat was no longer just a voice on the phone. I backed away from the window, heart racing, every instinct screaming at me to run but nowhere to go. The phone rang again, slicing through the silence like a knife, making me jump. I froze, dread flooding me, my body refusing to move as the shrill sound echoed through the house. I had to act, but fear rooted me in place, my mind torn between protecting the children and confronting the unknown. The children slept on, blissfully unaware of the danger that crept closer with every ring. I was their only protection. The ringing continued, insistent, demanding an answer I wasn't sure I wanted to give. I knew I had to answer, even as every instinct screamed for me to run. My hand hovered over the receiver, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. The phone's shrill ring was unbearable. I couldn't face that voice again, but I had to do something. I needed help. I checked the children one last time, then crept downstairs. The phone sat on the wall, innocent and menacing. Hands shaking, I dialed 999. Police, I whispered, voice trembling. I explained the calls, the voice, the threat. I'm alone with 2 children. Please, send someone. Tears finally fell as I begged for help. The operator's calm voice was a lifeline. Help is on the way, she promised. Relief and fear battled inside me. I clung to the phone, waiting. The house felt more dangerous than ever. The operator, Carol, kept me talking, her voice steady. Stay on the line, a patrol car is coming. She asked me to keep the caller talking if he rang again, to help trace the call. The thought chilled me, but I agreed. Suddenly, the other line beeped. The caller was back. He's calling, I whispered. Carol urged, keep him talking, we're tracing now. I switched lines, heart pounding, silence, then the familiar breathing. Hello? I managed, the voice. Why haven't you checked the children? He knew I'd gone upstairs. I stalled, desperate to keep him on the line. Seconds crawled by. The breathing continued, heavy and menacing. I counted in my head, praying for the trace to work. The house felt like it was closing in. I was running out of time. The silence was suffocating. I pleaded, my voice trembling. Leave us alone. My hands shook as I gripped the phone, desperate for any sign this was just a cruel prank. The caller just breathed, slow and deliberate, the seconds dragging out like an eternity. Each exhale sent chills down my spine, filling the silence with dread. Suddenly Carol's voice cut in, urgent and frantic. Janie, we've traced the call. Get out of the house, now! Panic surged through me. Why would she sound so terrified? The calls are coming from inside the house, she shouted, her words echoing in my mind. My mind reeled. It couldn't be. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear anything else. From the upstairs extension, Carol yelled, her voice cracking. He's in the house with you. The words hit me like a physical blow. The world spun. He wasn't outside. He was here, somewhere in the darkness with me. The question, have you checked the children? Barmambats became horrifyingly clear. It wasn't just a threat. It was a warning. He was upstairs, maybe with them. The thought made my blood run cold. I stood frozen, terror rooting me in place. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The breathing on the phone was close, too close. It felt as if he was right behind me, watching. Then, a new sound, a soft creak from upstairs. My heart skipped a beat as I realized I wasn't alone. The truth hit me like a wave, crashing over every ounce of denial I had left. I had to move now. There was no time to think, only to act. The children were in danger, completely unaware of the nightmare unfolding just outside their door. I dropped the phone, adrenaline surging through my veins, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The house was no longer safe. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound a threat. I grabbed the nearest weapon, a frying pan, my only defense against the terror lurking upstairs. I had to protect them. Every second counted. I couldn't let fear win. I ran for the stairs, heart in my throat, every step echoing the nightmare that had become my reality. The line went dead. He knew I knew. I couldn't leave without the children. Gripping the frying pan, I crept upstairs. Each step was agony, every shadow a threat. At the top, I heard laughter, not cries. I burst into the children's room, ready to fight. Leo sat up in bed, holding a phone extension. He grinned mischievously. Mia giggled beside him. Leo put the phone to his mouth and, in a gravelly voice, whispered, "Have you checked the children?" My terror turned to disbelief. The monster was a 7-year-old prankster the whole night. A game. Relief and anger crashed over me. The police burst in, lights flashing. Leo's grin faded as he realized the trouble he was in. I sank to the floor, overwhelmed. The nightmare was over, but I would never forget. The truth was almost as shocking as the fear. The police were kind, but Leo got a stern talking to. The Hendersons rushed home, apologizing endlessly. They'd had no idea about the old phone line. I was paid extra, but it didn't matter. I never babysat for them, or anyone, again. The terror of that night haunted me for years. Every phone ring made me jump. Sometimes, the scariest monsters aren't in the shadows. Sometimes, they're the ones you're meant to protect. Even now, on quiet nights I remember, the fear never fully left. Some nights it feels like it never ended. The year was 1974, October in Columbia, Missouri, a town where neighbors knew each other by name, and the gentle rhythm of daily life rarely changed. The air was crisp with the scent of fallen leaves, and the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the quiet streets. In this close-knit community, trust was a given, and families felt safe letting their children roam freely until dusk. Children laughed and played outside, their voices echoing down the block, only heading home when the streetlights flickered on, signaling the end of another carefree day. On this calm evening, the Harriman family prepared for a rare night out, a special occasion that brought a sense of excitement. They entrusted their home and their most precious treasures, their children, to Jeanette Chrisman, a responsible 13-year-old babysitter known for her maturity and kindness. The house was filled with the ordinary sounds of family life, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of a clock, the distant laughter of children. Jeanette moved through her routine with quiet confidence, tidying up toys and preparing snacks, making sure everything was just right. She was thoughtful and attentive, never suspecting that this ordinary night would be anything but routine. No one could have guessed this would be her last babysitting job. As the Harriman's car disappeared down the street, Jeanette became the sole guardian of the sleeping children, the only one awake in the quiet house. The world outside seemed peaceful, but inside, a sense of responsibility settled on her shoulders. The silence in the house grew deeper, every creak of the old wooden floor, and every whisper of wind outside suddenly amplified in the stillness. Shadows stretched across the walls, and the familiar became just a little bit strange. What seemed like a peaceful night, wrapped in the comfort of suburbia, was about to become a nightmare that would haunt the town for years to come. Evil often hides behind the mask of normalcy, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, when no one is watching, and when innocence feels most secure. Jeanette checked on the children, Gregory, sleeping soundly, and Melissa, who had a slight cold, but was resting peacefully. She adjusted their blankets, her care evident in every gesture. Downstairs, Jeanette settled in with her homework, the soft glow of a lamp pushing back the darkness. The house was quiet, the only sounds the ticking clock and the scratch of her pen, but outside, someone was watching. The peace was an illusion. A predator had chosen this house, this night. Jeanette was unaware, focused on her essay, while danger crept closer. The quiet was not safety, it was the breath before a scream. The stage was set for tragedy. In the stillness, the first threads of fear began to weave through the night. Soon, everything would change. The phone rang, shattering the silence and making Jeanette jump. It was just past 10 o'clock. Maybe Mrs. Harriman checking in, she thought. She answered, but there was only silence on the other end. After a few moments, she hung up, unsettled. The house no longer felt peaceful. Tension crept in. She tried to focus on her homework, but her eyes kept darting to the windows and shadows. Was it just a prank call? She tried to convince herself it was nothing. But the silence now felt heavy, charged with unease. Every sound seemed suspicious. The ordinary night had shifted. Something unseen had reached into the house. Jeanette's sense of safety was gone. Fear had found its way in. The phone rang again, more jarring than before. Jeanette hesitated, then answered. Again, only silence. This was no wrong number. Someone was toying with her. "Who is this? Please stop calling," she pleaded, but got no reply. Fear tightened its grip. She checked the locks, peered through curtains, but saw nothing outside. The feeling of being watched grew unbearable. She considered calling the police, but doubted they'd believe her. The house felt like a cage, shadows twisting in the dim light. She retreated from the windows, seeking safety in the center of the room. The game had begun, and she was its unwilling player. The silence was now a threat. Jeanette was trapped, alone with her fear. The phone rang a third time. Jeanette nearly screamed. Dread and curiosity compelled her to answer. This time, a man's low, raspy voice whispered, "Have you checked the children?" The words were a threat, not a question. He knew she was babysitting. He knew about the children. Jeanette's blood ran cold. "Who is this? What do you want?" she stammered. The man only chuckled, then repeated slower, "Have you checked the children?" Panic surged. Had something happened upstairs? She dropped the phone and raced for the stairs, terror pounding in her chest. The house felt claustrophobic, every shadow a possible threat. The man's words echoed in her mind. She ran toward the answer she feared most. The safety of the children was all that mattered. The nightmare was now fully real. At the top of the stairs, Jeanette found the children safe, still sleeping. Their peaceful faces, undisturbed by the chaos unfolding below, gave her a fleeting sense of relief. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything would be all right. But the silence in the house felt unnatural, heavy with a tension she couldn't shake. Relief was brief. She realized the calls were a distraction. The truth hit her like a wave. Someone wanted her attention away from the children, away from the real danger lurking in the shadows. Her heart pounded as she pieced it together, dread settling in her stomach. Then, a noise downstairs, the unmistakable click of the phone receiver being replaced. It echoed through the house, shattering the fragile calm. Jeanette froze, every instinct screaming that something was terribly wrong. The calls weren't coming from outside, they were coming from inside the house. The realization sent a chill down her spine. The threat was not distant, but terrifyingly close, sharing the same walls, the same air. He was there, somewhere below. Every shadow seemed to move, every creak of the floorboards a possible sign of his presence. Jeanette's mind raced, trying to remember every detail, every possible escape. Panic seized her, but she remembered the master bedroom had a phone. It was her only chance, a lifeline in the darkness. She forced herself to breathe, to focus, to move. Moving silently, she crept down the hall, every sound magnified. The floor seemed to groan beneath her feet, and she winced at every tiny noise, terrified it would give her away. The hallway stretched before her, each step a test of courage. In the bedroom, she dialed the operator, voice trembling. "There's a man in the house. The calls are coming from inside. Please send the police." Her words tumbled out in a desperate rush, fear making her hands shake so badly she nearly dropped the phone. The operator acted quickly, but time was running out. Jeanette's terror was palpable. She clung to the phone, listening for any sign that help was on its way. Her breath shallow and ragged. The house was no longer a home, it was a trap. Every familiar corner now felt sinister, every shadow a possible hiding place for the intruder. The walls seemed to close in, suffocating her with fear. Help was on the way, but would it arrive in time? The minutes stretched endlessly, each second a lifetime as she waited, straining to hear sirens in the distance. The silence was now deadly. It pressed in on her, amplifying every fear, every doubt. She listened, barely daring to breathe, hoping the next sound would be the police, and not him. Jeanette's desperate plea hung in the air, unanswered for now. The phone cord twisted in her trembling hands, her mind racing with thoughts of her children, her own safety, and the stranger lurking somewhere in the darkness. The nightmare had reached its peak. Jeanette stood alone, caught between hope and terror, praying that help would arrive before it was too late. Officer Curtis Weldon responded within minutes, lights flashing as he arrived at the Harriman home. From outside, everything looked normal, lights on, no signs of trouble. The front door was unlocked, a chilling detail. Weldon entered, announcing himself, but the house was silent. The living room was undisturbed, a textbook open on the sofa. He searched the ground floor, no signs of forced entry or struggle. The kitchen phone sat quietly in its cradle. Upstairs, he found the children safe, sleeping soundly. But Jeanette was nowhere to be found. He searched every room, calling her name. Only silence answered. The babysitter who had called for help had vanished. The house was a puzzle with a missing piece. Relief for the children was overshadowed by dread. The nightmare was far from over. The Harrimans returned to a scene of police lights and confusion. Their children were safe, but Jeanette Chrisman had vanished without a trace. Police searched the house and neighborhood. No clues, no struggle, nothing. It was as if she'd been erased. The only evidence. Jeanette's frantic call. "The calls are coming from inside the house." Investigators believed the intruder used the kitchen phone to torment her, but his motive was a mystery. It wasn't robbery or passion, it was something colder. Weeks passed, but no trace of Jeanette was found. The town was gripped by fear. Trust was shattered. Her disappearance became a local legend, a warning whispered for years. Jeanette was gone, leaving only questions and grief. Decades have passed, but the mystery of Jeanette Chrisman endures. Her name, once whispered in shock and sorrow, still lingers in the memories of those who lived through that chilling night. The passage of time has not dulled the pain or the questions that remain unanswered. Each year, as the anniversary approaches, the story resurfaces, stirring up old fears and unresolved grief. The children she protected are now adults. The house has new owners. Yet for many, the house is more than just a building. It's a symbol of innocence, lost, a place forever marked by tragedy. Neighbors still recall the night when sirens shattered the quiet, and the sense of safety was forever changed. Officer Weldon is long retired, but the case remains open, a haunting, unsolved puzzle. Generations of detectives have pored over the evidence, hoping for a breakthrough that never came. The files grow older, but the hope for justice never truly fades. The story has become an urban legend. The babysitter, the phone calls, the revelation that the killer was inside. It's retold in hushed voices at sleepovers and around campfires, a cautionary tale that blurs the line between fact and fiction. The details may change, but the core of the story remains the same. A young girl, alone, facing unimaginable terror. It taps into our deepest fears, the violation of home, the presence of evil where we feel safest. The idea that danger can lurk just beyond the door, or even within the walls we trust, is a fear that resonates across generations. The story lingers because it could happen to anyone, anywhere. Police have revisited the case, but no evidence, no suspect, no closure. Each new investigator brings fresh eyes, but the trail always seems to go cold. The unanswered questions haunt not just the family, but the entire community. The man with the rasping voice vanished like a ghost. He left behind only fear and speculation, his identity forever shrouded in darkness. Some believe he still walks among us, while others think he disappeared into the night, never to be found. The story is a memorial to Jeanette, a reminder that not all mysteries are solved. Sometimes, darkness wins. Her memory is kept alive by those who refuse to forget, who light candles and leave flowers, hoping that someday, answers will come. For some, it's a legend. For others, an unsolved crime. The headlines may have faded, but the questions remain. Conversations in diners and living rooms still circle back to that night, as people wonder what really happened, and who was responsible. For those who remember, it's a tragedy that will not die. The pain of loss is as real today as it was then, and the hope for justice endures, even as the years slip by. Jeanette's final call for help echoes in the silent corridors of time. It's a plea that still haunts the hearts of those who hear her story, a reminder of vulnerability and courage in the face of terror. The story endures, a chilling warning that evil can strike anywhere, at any time. In remembering Jeanette, we remember to cherish our loved ones, to lock our doors, and to never take safety for granted.